Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I would like to welcome Mr. Manish Gulati, sir, in this virtual session where he will be sharing his experience in managing risk in international business. Thank you for honoring us with your presence, sir. We are really looking forward to learn from you and your experience. Sir is an executive director at HEG Limited and has been associated with the company for more than 27 years since May 1993 and started his career with sales and marketing in India. As the company grew in capacity, he started developing business in export markets and expanded the company's presence in more and more countries. He became Chief Marketing Officer in 2010. Meanwhile, he also started taking care of purchase of key raw material, equipment, shipping, and logistics. By then, already having spent 27 years with the company and having developed an in depth understanding of the customers, product application, quality, customer service, production planning, etc., he was promoted to be COO and CMO in Feb 2019 with the overall responsibility of plant operations, sales, logistics, customer service, besides marketing responsibility. With his extensive industry experience, he has brought a lot of value and perspective in all key management decisions. Over past years, he has been spending more and more time at the plant and has accumulated tremendous knowledge of all the technical processes, purchases, HR activities, besides his core strength of marketing and purchase. He was nominated as executive director in March 20 on the board of the company and now carries overall responsibility of running the affairs of the company. So please enlighten us with your wisdom.
Anyway, this wisdom is collected in bits and pieces over the journey, which you will also collect. Anyway, so it's good to actually learn from anybody's past experience who has walked down that path. So as you introduced me, it's correct. I started my career from sales and marketing. And as the company was growing and there was not much domestic demand to absorb our growth, so we started looking at global markets. So when I joined this company, we were just doing some business in Southeast Asian countries, which were like a natural extension to India. I mean, we were supplying something in Thailand, something in Malaysia, something in Indonesia, some product in Korea. Just, I mean, the countries which are quite similar to ours and were closer to ours, we could have our products reach there faster. But after I joined, I mean, we started looking at other countries. We ventured into Middle East. There were some easy Middle East countries and there were some very difficult Middle East countries. And then we established the business in US and Europe. And today we supply almost 70% of our production to more than 30 countries. So it has been quite a journey because I've been a through and through marketing guy. I mean, because I was very passionate towards, the job and I mean, company kept giving me more and more responsibility, and I kept doing justice to it. I mean, I was made the CEO, so now I'm sitting in plant actually. I used to sit in corporate office in Delhi and doing the marketing things, and now I live in Bhopal and I handle the plant, and now I'm on the board, etc. So anyway, so we will speak a little bit about this journey of establishing an Indian company in 30 countries and how it all began and how do we take our how we develop these markets. So you see, it starts with just I'll give you a two-line brief on what we do. We make a product which is called graphite electrodes, and these electrodes are used by steel plants for steel melting. So it's a very technical product. We have this technology from a French company. It's a very high-tech product and fiercely competitive because in our product quality is paramount because they're using our electrodes to melt steel. So if the electrode breaks or gives higher consumption, so all the their production gets affected. So how to establish a product which is technical from a manufactured product, technical product in which we have German competitors, we have American competitors, we have Japanese competitors. So it was quite a tough journey in the last few years. So let me begin by saying that okay, how do we first is to how do you discover your markets? You have a product, you have a plant in India. how do you find where do I go and sell? So for that, for example, I took up a list of who are the major steel making countries of the world. So we found that, okay, other than China, it is US, the Germany, France, Italy, and there are Southeast Asian countries. Korea is a major steel producing nation. So first we target countries where we want to be doing business. Then next is you look for channels. So you go to those countries, try to find people or companies who are available locally who can represent you, because they become your first line of defense. They become the face of the company also and your first line of defense also. So they then, guide us, okay, which customer is good, which is not good, and they keep interacting with them, keep track of local news. And that is how once you establish contact with customer, take your product, make presentations, give all kinds of assurance, a competitive price, make a trial first, establish your product. So this is how a business begins actually. It begins in a very small way, and then you have to keep doing the right things in which the quality, service, delivery, you have to meet the customer's expectations. And that is how you build business country by country. So when you come at how do you manage the risk? So you start with a particular country. Let's see if I have experience of dealing in 30 countries, I will probably rate, as far as risk point is concerned, I will probably rate US as the safest. Why? Because business is clean, it's straight, the payment risk is minimal. There you don't have those fly-by-night customers who will take your product and refuse to pay or bring up frivolous issues. So these developed countries like US and followed by Europe, these are in my mind, for an industrial product like ours, are the safest, followed by Japan, followed by South Korea. So first we have to see what kind of, whatever business we are doing in a particular country, there is a country risk. See, I have dealt with the best and the worst countries in the world. And like you say, you learn more from your failures rather than your successes. So I'll give you an example. There was a customer in Venezuela. Now see, when I speak names of these countries, you will understand. Venezuela. Okay, so Venezuela, the big steel company, the name was Sidor, SIDOR, and it was a big consumer, big buyer of our product. So that company was privately owned by a group in Argentina. So overnight, what happens is, because of their military coup and all that, they nationalize the company. Sidor gets nationalized. Very good. So all the companies whom we were dealing with, the government, the army takes it over. And HEG is continuing to supply. And we continue to supply, money kept coming in, we send them more material. So that business was running into crores. Almost, I would say, it was almost in 1 year, it was 200 crores worth of business. So that was for a company like ours, which is, let's say, a 2,000 crore company, a 200 crore business matters a lot. It was like 10% of our business. And then suddenly country starts going down into the dumps. They don't have dollars. They don't have dollars to pay. And that is the time, we got alert because we were watching the news and our representative there was always keeping a tab. So we found out that, my goodness, now we are going to have it. So if the government the army has taken over, they don't have money to pay, the plant is not running well, then they have a forex risk, they didn't have forex reserves. So how will our dollars come home? Eventually, we lost money big time. We lost 30 crores. Whatever we could recover, by that time we could put brakes on our shipment because the vessels had sailed, they had gone. So I could not, I stopped something in the high seas. So I diverted them to Europe and I said, no, we are not selling. We informed the shipping line, sorry, bring back our goods. See, it takes 2 months for goods to reach from India to Venezuela. By the time I could slam the brakes, half of the damage was done. I could not stop something reaching Venezuelan shores, because once they reach there, then the goods get nationalized and they just take delivery of that. And it was open credit. They were not opening the LC or something. So it was just like they take the material and pay later. So we lost 30 crores worth of money in almost this. The story is about an 8-year-old story. But there's one important thing which every one of you should do if you start your own business or you work for companies. Always stay insured. So we have this ECGC, Export Credit Guarantee Corporation of India. So they have these multi-buyer policies for countries which are less risk prone. Then they have another restricted list where you have to take specific approvals. So what we do is we always take an annual policy from them. So when this money got stuck, we rushed to file the insurance claim, and really fortunate for us, they processed it, they looked at all the papers, we provided them all the proofs, and the insurance company paid for it. But every time we cannot be as lucky, because insurance companies will find out 10 faults in this paperwork and that paperwork, and you didn't do this and you didn't give that. So despite being insurance, is it better that we guard our money very well. So this is one country risk which I wanted to share. Next, Iran. I'm not sure how much of you guys keep track of that. So certainly US has this geopolitical situation and they put sanctions on Iran. Iran was again a very important country for us, with more than 10% of our sales going just to Iran. So Iran gets stuck. Then for some years between India and US, we were allowed to export our goods. And because Iran was exporting oil to India, so there were dollars. So it was like a barter system, not exactly dollars, but it was dollars initially, and then it became a barter system because India was buying oil from Iran and country was exporting other than our product. A lot of things, rice, wheat, a lot of things goes from India to Iran. So that mechanism worked for a few years. And then on 6th of August 2017 or 18 rather, US put a full clampdown that no, some products are banned from going to Iran. So this is another country risk. Certainly, now Manish Gulati has to fetch other markets where we can sell 10% of our produce. So I have to locate home from our product. So I have to develop something overnight. If suddenly a country where I was exporting 10% of our total production, it goes FUT or it comes under sanctions, you get stuck there. So this is another example I wanted to give you. What is a country risk? Now coming to the other type of risk which you face normally is the credit risk. Now the credit risk is, I mean, for many of the products, yes, letter of credit is the best, but how many customers really want to give a letter of credit? Because when we are exporting from India, there are local suppliers also who are willing to give them on open credit. So for credit risk, if you can get a letter of credit from any company, that's the best. But it becomes a hygiene factor. Like for example, if today I'm sitting in plant, if I'm buying a X product from 3 companies, 2 of them are giving me an open credit. Why should I really go and bother and open an LC for the 3rd company? Is there really a need? Because opening a letter of credit blocks my limit with the banks. Why should I? I mean, if you're getting something, if you're buying something for your house, if something is getting door delivered and person says you pay after 30 days, will you prefer that? Or will you say, a company says, no, pay me advance or pay me an LC, go through all the paperwork and then I will deliver. So what happens is in each market, it actually becomes kind of a hygiene factor. So this is a given. I mean, the customer says, okay, these are my payment terms. I will pay in 30 days no matter what. You want to supply, do not want to supply, it's completely your outlook. So in that case, again, this insurance thing is extremely important. We do try. In some countries, we still do business on LCs. But more or less, everybody, slowly, gradually, one supplier agrees to supply on open credit, then others have to follow. But it still remains a risky business. The next surest form of getting your money is the cash against documents. I don't know if I'm sure you must be knowing what is cash against documents. I mean, you ship the goods, you send the document from your bank to the customer pays for it, takes the documents, goes to the shipping line, gives them the bill of lading, and takes charge of the goods. Now, here the only risk is that you have shipped something and the customer, I mean, it takes me a month to ship, let's say, to Europe or let's say to Turkey. Turkey is also a very important market. By the time goods land there, the customer comes in bad shape, bad financial shape, or the plant closes down and suddenly doesn't want to take the goods. Now, what do? Now you have to bring your goods back. And this is not as easy as it is sounds. I cannot just blow a whistle and say, okay, ask the shipping line, return, bring it back to India. I don't care. Because for that, in some countries, there's a rule that you have to take the customer's permission to take it back, even if it is lying at the port. So once I have got stuck in this kind of a situation with a customer in Turkey. So Turkey, the goods went and the customer didn't take it. And we didn't realize it because once we send the goods, we send the documents to the bank, cash against documents. I'm talking about cash against documents, and money automatically comes. When the money didn't come in 30 days, we started to get worried. We contacted the customer and they said, no, we have not taken your goods. We are not in good shape. Our factory has stopped. So I said, where are my goods? They said, must be at the port. And this I discovered not even 30, rather 30 days, 35, 40 days later, that my goods are at the port. Nobody to look after it. And then we asked the shipping line to check. They said, yeah, your containers are at the port. The customer is not taking it. So there's a rule in Turkey that if you do not pick your goods, neither the customer nor the supplier do not pick the goods within 45 days of arrival, the government takes away the goods. Fantastic. So we learn as we go by. So by the time I could react, those 45 days were over. The government, they call it nationalized. Like you can't come and keep your containers at Mumbai port. Sometime, I mean, somebody will say, what is this nonsense? Whose containers are these? The customer is not taking it. The supplier is not taking it. So this port or there's a public parking where you come and keep your goods. So they took away the goods and they sold it right in front of my eyes. Because by the time I read, no, this is a rule. 45 days, no, nothing. I sent my 2 colleagues who were reporting to me to Turkey and they went to the customs and they said, sorry, but we were not aware that our containers have not been taken by the customer. They said, no. Now these goods are ours. We will sell it because nobody came to claim it. That's very funny. Then we again lost money. Then again we rushed to ECGC. So, I mean, these kind of situations will keep happening. I mean, our company and we have lost money, but considering the size of business we do, just because we are extra alert to these risks and we manage well ahead of time, whether it's a country risk or a credit risk, our instances of losing money are, I mean, I can count on my fingers, 4, 5, 6, that's it, in the last 20 years. And these examples stand out. These are examples where you fail to manage a risk. I mean, because in this big bad world, things can go wrong. You can have sanctions, you can have wars, you can have customer going fat, you can have country being taken over by army, just like Venezuela. So these are some of the examples which I was giving. Another example is when genuinely a customer doesn't remain credit worthy. I mean, they make losses in their business and they are unable to pay. Now, some countries like US, etc., they have this Chapter 11 bankruptcy rule. So they apply for Chapter 11 and then you cannot ask them for the money and then they settle what assets they have and the bankers take over and they try to pay back. So we have lost once or twice. We have lost money on this account also. We were good, the customer was good, but the finances were not good, and there were two instances in Europe that they had our material and it was an open credit. They were supposed to pay in 90 days, but in 90 days the world becomes a different place in 90 days. 90 days is too much. So 90 days the finances went down and they didn't give us the money. Again, back to ECGC. But it's not easy. I mean, in one of the examples, ECGC didn't pay us because they have their own rules. You should have informed us within 45 days of payment not coming. Now, what happens is when you are regularly doing business after business after business, if I go and inform the insurer that I have not been paid in 45 days, the first reaction is stop further supplies. The moment you stop further supplies, the customer says, sorry, you have to supply, otherwise we do not give your last money. So it is a very precarious situation. If you go to insurer and play by the rule and say, no, they are not paying. We said, okay, good, don't supply further and file a claim. But you lose the customer. So some customers are habitual offenders. They will pay late, just like most of us Indians. We will never pay on time. We think it's our greatness that we should not pay. दूसरे का पैसा दबा के रखो. अरे दे देंगे ना, हफ्ते में दे देंगे. Let's protect them. We have some very wise financial managers in every company who say, oh, if we retain suppliers' money, we are earning so much interest on it. So there are wise people in other companies also. Not that we are the wisest. So all kinds of, these all kinds of risk are there. There's a country risk, there's a payment risk, there's a customer risk. Normally what we do is, if we are approaching a new customer, we have ways and means to check it. First is, of course, you ask for a Dun and Bradstreet report, credit report, go through it for a new customer, see how they have, what are their assets, it's a profit-making company or not. You do all the due diligence, but then things don't remain what they are today. That means anybody who's in international business has to keep a very close tab on developments. I'll share a funny example. You heard about this Iraq war, and there was a customer in Erbil, ERBIL. Now ERBIL, there was a customer in Erbil, and it was owned by a Turkish company, and we kept supplying. And ISIS was approaching, and I alarmed the agent that I think we should not supply because I think this ISIS is approaching. And he said, no, don't worry, it's very close to Turkey, we are very safe. And in 2 days, ISIS was sitting in the plant, and I had my material there. So again we lost about 35-40 lakhs worth of money. So you see how alert you have to be in international business, because nothing stays true forever. What is true today is not true tomorrow. So you have to keep watching your customers, watching your credit. I mean, so one is, of course, you stay alert yourself. One additional benefit which you may have is you have your local representatives, because sitting here, I may not have access to real-time news. I may not know what is happening on the ground. Another way to check the credit, etc., is to see who are the other suppliers supplying to this company and contact them, then ask for their experience, ask for their payment experience. How is the management? Do they pay on time? This, that. So, I mean, if you are in international business, these are the kind of due diligence you will have to do. So if it is your money, your own money, or your company's money, so you have to make sure that your money comes home. So you can try, you can try asking for a letter of credit, you can try asking for cash against documents, but as I said, it becomes a hygiene factor. If others are supplying on open credit, you have to do that. And if you say no, okay, they'll say sit at home. No need to do business. So it's tricky, but yes, overall, if a company is alert, it is a manageable risk. It's not a risk which should terrorize you, not to do business. Okay, you do business at 100 places. Maybe you lose money one or two. If you're very smart, you lose money in one place, and that is okay. That is fine. Every company knows that in this big bad world of business, some amount of money might get into bad debt or something, and every company accepts this. And but there's a benchmark to it. I mean, you should not supply to 10 customers and lose money at 5 places. Then you're not a good international marketing guy. That means you have not done your due diligence very well, and you have not been alert, and you have not negotiated well. So if there's any, question from anybody's side, I'll be more than happy to answer it.
Sir, can you please repeat the Iran case, sir? How HEG faced risk in international business?
See, when the payments stopped, when there was normal business without any sanctions, etc., the business was happening in dollars. So when the banking channel, they stopped accepting our bills in dollars, and there was no, see, all this bank and everything is routed via US. So once US intermediary bank is, mostly you'll find them in New York. Or the next challenge is Europe. So US and Europe together decide that we are not going to be routing the money, so that channel breaks. So now if I've sent something, now I need my money. How do I get this money? I lodge it with the State Bank of India, who sends my documents to State Bank of India in New York, and they give to some American bank. That American bank sends to the Iranian bank, and that is how the money is routed, because the trade is happening in dollars. So when the sanctions initially started, they stopped this money routing business, either through Frankfurt or from New York. That stopped. So we had to, but one channel was open because India was importing oil. So India had some balances to pay. So Indian government, to help the Indian exporters, they made designated UCO Bank. Well, UCO Bank was the bank which was receiving, UCO Bank had to pay for our oil imports, and that was being set off. Then US further tightened the sanctions. So that thing also stopped. Today, we are unable to do business with Iran in any way, although Iran is a very good market for us. They need our products. We need them. But the global situation doesn't allow. And then Americans put this other condition that anybody who will deal with Iran will not deal with American company. So, but then we are stuck because we have business in America. So that means you cannot deal. And our suppliers are also in America. So these are the risks. I mean, one country where our company was happily supplying for last more than 25 years suddenly becomes a no-go. So that's a risk in international business. Now, what do you want to do? I mean, one important customer, one important country suddenly disappears from your horizon. It's a no-go for you. So where do I take those goods? I mean, I have to suddenly find a home for them.
Good morning, sir. Actually, my question is that you mentioned that you can, if you're supplying to a particular country, in order to check their credit worthiness or whatever you may call it, you can, contact other suppliers also who are supplying to them to know how they are in their payment terms and everything. So, I mean, how do you actually get to know their other suppliers or the companies who are supplying to them? And how can we trust them on this issue? I mean, they can also manipulate and tell things to you about that company. And how do you get to know that?
So, Shreya, it is not as difficult. For example, you're supplying to a customer, like we are supplying to the steel industry. We know a steel industry need a couple of products. Other than ours, they will need graphite electrodes, they'll need refractories, they'll need some machinery. So when we appoint our local representative, our representative is anyway there, so he gets in touch with them and he finds out when he meets the purchasing guys. These are the information you gather informally. I cannot send them an email demanding a list of your present suppliers. So when you talk, they'll say, oh, we get this from there, we get this from there. Even if you walk inside their plant and if you just look around, you will see which brands, which suppliers are supplying to this company. And then you can privately contact them and ask them that, okay, I'm going to be supplying here. How has been your experience? And one key thing which I said at the beginning, that when you get this Dun & Bradstreet report, there are agencies who are supplying credit worthiness reports. You can have a look at them, and they always list their key suppliers, key customers. Some information is there. Rest you have to gather. This is all happens when you start the business. Once you start the business, you become friends with them. You keep visiting them. They keep visiting you, and then you learn a lot about them. So it's not difficult to, and of course, I mean, this is what your job is, to see who's speaking the truth and who's not. I mean, if you are on the data gathering spree, some primary information you get, some you gather from the market. That's what market intelligence is. And then you find out, you contact people, you figure out. Like, I mean, you can just take a basic example. If you are in Amity, and if you have a factory, and if you supply something to somebody who has a unit near about Delhi, of course you will know that this is a product. So they will be needing other suppliers. You go visit their plant, talk to them, and then on this talk, they themselves will tell you, we are buying this from here, this from here, this from here, and then you privately contact them that, okay, you're supplying to this company. How has been your credit experience? And all this, some of this, you can also get it in their Dun & Bradstreet credit reports.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Actually, I had this doubt that one piece of advice you hoped that someone would have given you on international market, on trading in international market a long time ago.
Yes, I learned a couple of things the hard way. And one advice I would say in international market is, I would say, to be extra alert, because when you're swimming in a pool and swimming in an ocean is different. So stay alert to all kinds of possibilities. Don't rule out anything. Ask and ask. The more you're informed, the more intelligence you have, the better is your decision making, and less is the credit risk. So you have to do the more homework you will do before actually supplying the goods on open credit. Like, for example, first check from the insurance company whether this company, what credit risk the country has. So they have this country risk list. You can go on the website. It'll give you a list of countries which are open, which the insurance company doesn't want to know whom you're supplied, where you're supplied. Then there's a B list, restricted countries. For them, you have to ask for a specific cover. And so this is one part. Second part, you appoint a local representative, give him 1 to 2% commission on it. So he tells you the situation on the ground. Third is, you visit yourself and again and keep regularly visiting, so that you keep your eyes and ears open and what is happening on the ground. If you go keep looking at their annual reports, their quarterly results, how they are doing, are they going down, are they going up, and a general business environment also. Suppose if in this COVID situation, many companies went FUD, the weaker companies disappeared. So you have to try and build a customer profile in which customers are reliable, stable, who have a history of working for 15, 20 years. Then you know, okay, now they are here for the long run. They have seen business cycles. See, sometimes the smaller customer will pay you a much better price. Larger the customer, less the profit. Because the larger customer will have many suppliers like me running around to them for business. The smaller customer, a small shop, you can go and sell at whatever price. But that extra margins come with risks.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. And there is one more question on behalf of Pratima. I think she's facing some network issues. So her question is, was there any moment while doing international business or trade when they predicted that the risk was high, but you still had to go with the trading, and what was the outcome?
See, there are high risk countries. Like, let me give you an example. Any country which is politically unstable is risky. Like, let me give you a very interesting example of Egypt. Now, Egypt is one country where the business I developed myself from customer to customer. We still continue to do business because we try to deal with only the top 2 or 3 reliable companies. We are not dealing with them. Because these companies have history and we believe that they are here for the long run. We take approvals, we have insurance cover from the ECGC, but it is a risk. It's still a risk. Whenever I see that payments are not coming from Egypt, I get anxious. That my goodness, again, Manish Gulati, this is going to happen again, yet again. Again, you're going to get stuck. So I always get worried. If money is not coming from US, I forget it. Maybe some paper would have got lost. I just send him a reminder and money comes. But when these kind of countries, like Egypt is one classic example, where we know the risk and we are doing business for last 25 years and have yet not lost a rupee. I may lose it today or tomorrow, but yet not lost a rupee. Money still comes. But the only thing is that when the country is risky, then let your customer be extremely credit worthy. The companies which we are doing business with have been there in business for 20 years. So it's okay. I believe even if the country is risky, the customer is very good.
Good morning, sir, and thank you for the session today. Sir, as you were telling the story of Turkey that you experienced there, that the importer had refused to accept your consignment, and within 45 days, that was the rule there. The government has to then take over the products and then auction it for themselves. So, sir, this seems like either a lack of communication from the importer's part or a lack of due diligence from your local representative in Turkey. So I just wanted to ask, I'm sure there are very country specific and government specific rules and regulations. Apart from that, what are the general due diligence and the judicial institutions and trade institutions that one has to have great knowledge of in order to avoid such mishaps?
Okay. So good question, very good question rather. So as I see, the failures and the mistakes are the biggest teacher. In normal course of business, nobody reads the fine print. We keep doing business, and nobody reads that. In Turkey, the case was when it was. I will tell you exactly what happened. The goods went from there. So it becomes, when you do business regularly for years and years, it becomes a mechanical process. So okay. The vessels went, the documents went to the bank, and it is assumed that the customer's bank informs the customer that, okay, guys, your shipment has arrived at the port, your documents are here, please come pay and take your documents. By the time the financial condition of the customer worsened, so everybody was happily sleeping. We were sleeping thinking the goods are gone, money will come. And the agent also he was also sleeping. In fact, he could have, in retrospect, the ideal thing is he should confirm when the goods have arrived to check with customer that, okay, have you taken charge of the goods or not? So he was found sleeping. So, and the shipping line informed us 30 days later that your goods have not been taken. First, I got two indications. When it appeared when I'm the marketing head and I have several people working under me, they're doing 30 countries business and this is rolling every day, business is happening. And when mistake is about to occur, it will occur. And then there'll be a lot of lessons out of it. So my people kept sleeping because it's normal. I mean, रोज माल जा रहा है, रोज export हो रहा है, पैसा आ रहा है, सब आ रहा है. So it figured in my data statement. So that is the first thing that, oh, payment got delayed, but the terms were cash against document. How can this get delayed? So I check, I ask कि ये पैसे क्यों नहीं आए? क्योंकि मेरे वीकली रिपोर्ट आती है. वीकली रिपोर्ट आती है तो उसमें ऊपर उसका नाम आया. तो मुझे लगा कि इसका नाम कैसे आ गया? ये तो पैसे 20 days में आते हैं. Now it's crossed 30 or 35 days. Then I called my shipping office. Then I called my Turkey agent. How did the money get delayed? He said, what? Which money? कौन सा पैसा? मैंने कहा एगे मेटल का पैसा. कहता है, oh really? He picks up the phone and speaks the procurement manager and he says, अरे वो HEG is saying that you have not paid. They said, yeah, we have not paid because we didn't take the goods. I said, what? You didn't take the goods? Where are the goods? They said, the port. I said, oh. And they said, oh, goods are lying at the port. Oh my goodness. Then I called my shipping office in Mumbai. Where are the goods? They said, what? Which goods? I said, Ege metal. He said, oh, let me speak to the shipping line. So he calls the shipping line, says, where are the containers? They said, okay, give us a day. We'll check on the system. They check on the system. These containers are there at the port. said, what? So, if everybody is sleeping, so now these kind of instances, there are lessons. It's like you say, there are no mistakes in life. There are only lessons, and every lesson is repeated until learned. So we learned out of it. Oh, ये भी देखना पड़ेगा, ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि मतलब बिजनेस करते करते बीच में कुछ कंटेनर्स कस्टमर की हालत खराब होगी, कस्टमर ने इन्फॉर्म भी नहीं किया हमें, कस्टमर इन्फॉर्म करता तो हम बोलते. सो एवरीबडी वाज सर फॉरगेट इट, उनका माल है, अपने आप देख लेंगे. शिपिंग लाइन ने बोला ठीक है, हमारी तो टैक्सी है, अपने आप बड़ा सा बिल बना के HEG को भेज देंगे. सो नोबडी इन्फॉर्म्स एनीबडी. And one day it appears and we get alert. Why is this money not come? We check here, we there, the goods are at the port. By the time I react, I rush people from India to speak to customs. They said, no, sorry, you're late. 45 days, goods are ours. We will auction it. So I saw my goods getting auctioned at 1/10 the price. They put in the newspaper clipping. These goods are for sale. कोई आया नहीं, इसका कोई माई बाप नहीं है. Please, किसको खरीदना है? Very good, very funny. And I kept jumping here, up and down here. So these are the things you learn. Yes, every accident, every mistake happens when somebody has overlooked something. That's why you said, what kind of advice you want to get? I said, you have to be hyper alert in this business because anything can go wrong. The country can go wrong. The customer can go wrong. Anything can go wrong because you're swimming in an ocean. It's not a pool.
Yes, sir. So I would like to say, sir, as we have already learned about the type of risk and all, but you have cited such a wonderful example regarding the Venezuela one also, sir. So I have point out some points. For example, sir, as you said, there were army occupied that country. So there was associated a political risk, right, sir? And the country and that company was also not able to pay you guys. So it was economic risk. And as you already said, the ship was already went and you stopped halfway. Some of them already reached there. So it was a transit risk that way, right, sir? And coming to Turkey, coming to the example of Turkey, as you did not know the rule, like the goods if kept at the port more than 30 or 45 days. So there was some knowledge inadequacy in your part, sir.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah. So because ma'am has already taught us this very nicely. So this was the thing I pointed out with your example, sir. That's it.
See, that is what I've said. See, for a company like ours, now these are examples which are old when we were developing business in export markets. So these are the things you learn as you go by. It's not a handbook that say, okay, follow this. There will always something will happen which is not in the handbook. Something will happen and then you learn and then you'll become learned. So when you do a mistake, oh, then you will learn it forever. And now I know very well which country has which rule. But I mean, these kind of, see, कई बार लोग क्या होता है, fine print नहीं पढ़ते. और ये fine print तब आता है लाइफ में जब गलती हो जाती है. तो कहते अरे वो बुक निकालना, नहीं तो इतने मोटे मोटे कॉन्ट्रैक्ट होते हैं, छोटा सा कहीं लिखा होता है. अभी I have a litigation with a Russian customer. उसमें एक छोटा सा पॉइंट था कि arbitration place is Russia. We received a letter which was in Russian, which was like a notice, and nobody understood what it is. हमने सोचा पता नहीं कोई जनरल मेलर आया होगा. वो मेरे मार्केटिंग हेड की सीट पे पड़ा रहेगा. It was a notice to appear in the court. अरे हमने सोचा अरे ये क्या आ गया, मतलब रशियन में लिखा था, धत तेरे की. Now what is this? So रशियन में लिखा था तो हमने ट्रांसलेटर दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी वो के साथ कोई ट्रांसलेशन में था, तो we were in touch with that girl और अरे भेज दो यार, ट्रांसलेट करा दो, पता नहीं क्या बकवास लिखी है, समझ ही नहीं आ रही. वो गया, she took 7 days to return that 1 or 2 or 3 paper letter, and then we said, oh, ये तो नोटिस था कोर्ट का, and उन्होंने बोला था इस डेट तक आ जाओ या रिप्लाई दो. By the time we were doing this translation business, the फैसला हमारे अगेंस्ट हो गया, and now I'm fighting it in Indian court. अब क्या बोलूं, रोज इतने लेटर्स आते हैं. अब एक रशियन में आ गया, मैं सारे काम छोड़ के, ये मेरे को लगेगा आते हैं ना दुनिया भर के कागज आते हैं, कोई कुछ भेज देता है, कुछ भेज देता है. हमें लगा पता नहीं क्या लिखा है इसमें. अरे क्या लिखा है भाई, गूगल से करें, कैसे करें. तो पहले तो उसी में हम उलझ गए, एंड वी लॉस्ट अ मंथ बिकॉज आवर लीस्ट प्रायोरिटी जॉब. फिर किसी ने, भले आदमी ने सोचा देखो तो ये क्या लिखा है लेटर, ट्रांसलेटर को भेजा तो इट वॉज अ नोटिस. आप समझ रहे हो. तो बड़ी बड़ी कंपनियों में ऐसी ऐसी चीजें होती हैं. मतलब मैं बता रहा हूं कि कितनी चीजें गलत जा सकती है. So that is why, acha, then we learned, okay, ab aage se what is the learning? Bhai, please, if you get a letter by registered post, please be careful with it. It can be something dangerous. Learning. We become learned.
So last question would be from me. So, sir, how did you maintain your business during this COVID time, even though you told us that your competitors got shut down? So, how did you manage to stay in the business?
When the COVID first wave started, we had to close this factory, but it's a continuous process product. We took special permission from the state government to keep it running. And that was quite a big challenge when Prime Minister announced that country is going to go into lockdown. I was here and I immediately called all the senior people and all the key people to come inside. I said, come, leave your home, come inside the factory, because in our premises we have some guest houses and we are also running a school which is adjoining the plant. So I asked 150 people, I gave them 1 hour notice, because as soon as Prime Minister Modi's address finished, I immediately called everybody. I want 150 people inside, because there were some people, the plant works in 3 shifts. So there was some people going away. So we stopped them. Stop, don't go home. Don't go home. And then we called some of the key people who came inside, and we stayed inside, and I mean, we closed the doors and we just kept the factory running. We took special permission that this is a continuous process plant. It cannot be shut down. And then, I mean, we had everything inside. I mean, so many people inside. We just emptied the school and we made our own beds. I mean, because there was shortage of beds, where do the workers sleep? So we had a lot of pipes here and we had all the welding equipment. So we made a lot of wood. So we made our own beds. 150 beds were made in 5 days. So we managed to run the factory. Yes, during the COVID times, the demand was down, but then we kept working at 50% capacity for the first 2 quarters, April to June, July to September. And once this COVID thing then subsided and rules got relaxed, we again ramped up our production and demand also returned. For the first 6 months, we had less sales, but we picked up in the last 2 quarters. You can always see a little bit of this. If you just type my name in the Google, you'll find all my interviews which I give to CNBC, ET Now. I'm a regular with them every quarter. We have to present our results and answer the media and all that. So if you just type Manish Gulati on Google, you'll find me.
All questions have been answered.
Yes.
So now that we've come to the end of this session, I'd like to thank Mr. Manish Gulati for his invaluable time and exquisite articulation of the anecdotes that he has given us and the insights from his career and real life experiences. So as we know, experience is the best teacher, but the second best teacher is surely someone who has experienced everything and is willing to tell you and give you insights from his life. That is exactly what Manish sir has done today. And so thanks a lot for that, sir. Secondly, I would like to thank our faculty and program leader for international business, Professor Dr. Alka Maurya ma'am, for giving us this indispensable opportunity to interact with industry professionals and leaders such as Mr. Gulati. It has been a wonderful experience, ma'am, and thank you so much for that. Finally, a big thank you to everyone who has attended and been interactive. We look forward to more of such interactions and connection with industry people. Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I enjoy talking to people who are young, who want to make a difference. So I want to tell them about my mistakes so that you can learn from it and make your own unique mistakes and learn from them. But do not repeat my mistakes.
Thank you, sir, for sparing your time and also, agreeing to address at such a short notice.